The Trump administration is radically reshaping America and the world around it. In the inaugural Vantage Point essay from Australia Institute Press, Dr. Emma Shortis examines Trump's grim vision for America and the future of the Australia-US alliance. Pre-order your copy of After America, Australia and the New World Order, or become a Foundation subscriber to Vantage Point at australiainstitute.org.au/store or via the link in the show notes.
Will you actually back the policies that you supposedly stand for, or will you bow to corporate interests, to the bleedings from the Murdoch press, and just squib it? You have an historic opportunity here. Don't waste it.
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. The Treasurer knows. I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains economics, politics and policy in plain English. I'm Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director of the Australia Institute. And with just 3 seats left in doubt, the full scale of the Coalition's election defeat is now clear.
We are saying that Peter Dutton has lost the seat of Dixon. It's flipped red.
Well, tonight's not the night that we wanted for the Liberal Party or for our coalition or indeed for our country.
I think a few of those people need to actually have some deep reflection on their contribution to this loss.
We have an update and we have a new leader of the Liberal Party. Sylvia, Susan Lee will become the first woman to lead the Liberal Party.
We listened to the Australian people on Saturday and we will continue to listen to them.
She now faces a Himalayan political task, refiring her party after its worst ever federal loss to make it competitive in 3 years.
Despite the backing of News Corp and other corporate interests, the Coalition has won a little over 40 seats, likely its worst lower house result since World War II. For the progressive side of politics, it shows that the conservative ecosystem of right-wing media, big business and the Coalition can be beaten. And it gives the re-elected Albanese government a unique opportunity to implement some bold reforms. Joining me to discuss the right-wing media's role in this election and what could come next for the government is Walkley Award-winning journalist, the Australia Institute's Stephen Long. G'day, Stephen.
G'day, Ebony. Nice to be on Follow the Money again.
Yes, nice to have you back. So, the Coalition's defeat is really the big story that's come out of this election, along with Labor's thumping majority. And it really was the case that, like in most previous elections, News Corp, the Murdoch press, really got in behind the Dutton-led coalition throughout the campaign. What do you think this result tells us about its ongoing influence in the Australian political landscape?
Well, I'll just add, not just throughout the campaign, but throughout the whole term, Ebony. For my sins, I have to read the newspapers every morning when I get up, and barely a day went by when the Australian wasn't gunning for Labor and taking outrageously biased positions that really, really drove into Labor, always finding the dark cloud and the silver lining for the Labor Party. And yes, as you said, throughout the campaign. Now, it would be tempting to say that this shows that the emperor's got no clothes. What I think it certainly tells you is that the power of the Murdoch media is overstated. Rupert Murdoch has always liked to present himself as a kingmaker, but they can't buck the trend when it's leaning in a certain direction. In the past, the Murdoch press has tended, when that's happening, when there's going to be a progressive result, to actually shift tack and get behind the winning side. I actually think that there's been a change in the business model, which means it's almost impossible for them to do that. The rivers of gold of advertising have diminished and they rely on subscribers for their revenue, and they've carved out a niche with a right-wing audience that would scream blue bloody murder if they were actually to take a progressive stance. And so they were stuck with backing the coalition, and it led to bizarre things. So just over a week before the election, there was a front page of The Australian where they featured Peter Credlin, the former political advisor, the chief of staff for Tony Abbott, bemoaning, what have we done to deserve Labor? And saying, it's often said that the public gets the government they deserve. What have we done to deserve this? And another piece by Greg Sheridan saying that Labor's defence policy should be enough to lose at the election alone, and bemoaning the fact that the coalition wasn't campaigning on defence and taking a more hawkish line and making that the centrepiece of their policy. It was like a collective wailing and gnashing of teeth about the result. Meanwhile, over on Sky News, you had Sherry Markson with exclusive polling showing that the coalition could still win and giving an editorial endorsing Peter Dutton. It was kind of like a Japanese soldier on an island in the Pacific after the war was over, not realising that peace had been declared, still fighting on.
Yeah, I mean, some of the reactions, obviously you're talking about during the campaign as well, but some of the reactions after the result clearly showed that they were having a really rough time of it in the Murdoch press as well. Obviously, the Murdoch conglomerate has been one of the most feared media organisations in the world. Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has talked about kind of its role, I guess, in activating right-wing politics all around the world. But, I mean, what has happened to see it so diminished, I guess, in its influence compared to what it used to be?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to unpack there, Ebony. One is that the influence of the mainstream media has diminished, and we saw in this election the Labor Party in particular, but also the independents and to a lesser extent the coalition, courting influencers and giving interviews with influencers, because so many people no longer get their information, but especially younger people, from the mainstream media. So that's part of it. But the other thing I think is that they don't really have the influence that they've always claimed to. And governments run scared, progressive governments run scared of Sky News and the Murdoch press, afraid that they'll be beaten up, and haven't been willing to say, well, we'll just stand up and do what's right and the public will get behind us. And guess what? When you do, they do.
Yeah.
The Liberals certainly hoping that this seat of Curtin is one that will change hands tonight.
Millions of dollars is being spent trying to win this seat.
The Liberal Party's failure to win back the once prized seat of Curtin from independent Kate Chaney capped off a miserable night.
I'm so proud of the campaign that we've won and so thrilled to be here with so many of our beautiful volunteers.
So, Stephen, you just mentioned independence there as well. In Western Australia, certainly, we saw that Kate Chaney survived a big campaign against her, including from Seven West, which owns the only printed newspaper in Perth, as well as the gas industry, amongst others. So, I mean, what does it say when an independent like Kate Chaney, with no party apparatus behind her, can survive that kind of political attack, essentially?
Well, I think we shouldn't downplay the influence and importance of Seven West Media, which pretty much owns the West in terms of mainstream media. However, in an electorate, in a seat like Kate Chaney's, where there's a strong view that's anti-gas, where there's a strong view that sees the flaws in that policy, she's going to be able to command that even when the West Australian, when the mainstream media is behind another position. And that's what we saw. It underlines that if politicians are brave enough to take principled stands and support good policy, and there's a mood from the public that gets behind them, then there's only so much that right-wing media aligned to corporate interests can do to stop that mood and stop that political outcome.
The coalition obviously just had an absolute shocker of a result and not a great campaign either. Was it really, do you think it was really that the campaign was unsalvageable, or do you think the drop in the influence of the mainstream media and the Murdoch press in particular is kind of part of a longer term trend, do you think?
I think it's fair to say that it is both. I think it was a terrible campaign that was run by the coalition, the Liberal Party in particular, under Dutton. But the influence of the Murdoch press is waning. they command a certain audience that's rusted on, but they don't command the mass of the public in the way that, to the extent that they used to, they could claim to. And it's really important that that is recognised, because the bogey, the fear that the Murdoch press was all powerful, that Rupert was a kingmaker, that governments couldn't buck the line and couldn't defy the will of the Murdoch press and couldn't promote progressive policies, well, that myth needs to be debunked. We've seen it post-election, Ebony, as well, with Paul Kelly coming out and saying Labor won because they were centrists, so don't dare do any progressive policies, anything that strays from that very centre, to adopt perhaps what's in your platform, because woe betide the government that does, you'll lose support. So that's the de facto, that's the fallback position. But, you know, I've watched in Parliament House while staffers sit there glued to Sky After Dark, whilst they read assiduously the Murdoch press attacking them. And I've seen the attempts to appease. And guess what? Progressives need to learn the lessons of Neville Chamberlain. And when I say progressives, I guess I mean Labor. Appeasement doesn't work. There will be no peace for our time with the Murdoch press. They are going to attack you anyway. They are going to back the other side. They are going to push hard right. So you might as well actually stand for what you stand for and recognise that their influence is limited. And when you campaign with integrity behind policies you believe in, the public often gets behind you too.
I just want to spend a minute to talk about media concentration, because I take your point about the influence of the mainstream media kind of being on the wane, and for the Murdoch press in particular. But we at the Australia Institute have obviously done some research around media concentration across Australia, and the news isn't good there either. And that's not good for democracy either, is it, Stephen?
It's certainly not. We have far too much media concentration. I think that there's 4 companies that control more than 80% of our media, and certainly our written text-based media. We've also seen a massive decline in suburban and regional newspapers, which is a bad thing. And we've seen big platforms suck up the advertising revenue and diminish opportunities for media. But the fact is, media is fragmenting, and people are looking to different places for voices, for opinions, for ideas. In a sense, that's a good thing. At the same time, the level of concentration in the mainstream media is far too high. And it's a terrible situation where in many cities in Australia, your only mainstream voice for written news is a Murdoch paper, or in the West, 7 West. And that's just wrong. It's not good, and it needs to be countered. We actually do need to look at media concentration, notwithstanding that, because a lot of the stuff that's available online also is, how would I say, it's bigger, it's global, or it's hyper local. And you're not getting that stuff that you need, your bread and butter news, a lot of the time, that people need in their day-to-day. And that's why we certainly do need to address the concentration of mainstream media. It hasn't gone away. It's still an issue.
Forget about what you're being told by the ABC and the Guardian and the other hate media. Forget about that. Listen to what you're hearing on the doors. Listen to what people are saying on pre-polling. Know in your hearts that we are a better future for our country.
How important does that make the public broadcasters like the ABC and SBS, particularly when it comes to playing that democratic function, as you said, of the daily kind of bread and butter of news? And how can we support the public broadcasters to play that kind of a role more effectively when there's such a crisis for the rest of the media?
Well, I'm not sure whether the ABC had a good campaign. There was certainly a shadow that hung over that campaign, and that was Peter Dutton calling it the hate media and threatening that he would cut ABC funding if he got into power. What we need to have a robust, independent public broadcaster, which is certainly vital in an era when we have market failure when it comes to media. The revenue isn't there to support the kind of media we need. So we certainly need public broadcasting and independent content, free of fear and favour, free of commercial taint. To secure that, we need to look at a funding model, which means that funding is guaranteed. One thing we could consider, Ebony, is, for example, having a share of GDP which was allocated to public broadcasting. And we could have a pool for other independent media. And that way, if the ABC had a guaranteed funding model, and it wouldn't be one that didn't mean the ABC or SBS suffered pain when we got an economic downturn, because if we got a shrinking economy, they might lose revenue, but it wouldn't mean that they had to go cap in hand and negotiate with the government every few years to get their money, and have that potentially on some sort of even unconscious level influence what they do. Potentially even on an unconscious level influence editorial.
Yeah. In his election postmortem this week, Sean Kelly wrote that part of the problem was that the coalition believed its own narrative of party unity above all else, a narrative that was reinforced by the media. I also think it's very clear that even if their influence over the public is waning, certainly the Murdoch press is influential over the coalition. Why do you think elements of the media, whether it's from the Murdoch press or elsewhere, kind of didn't see this election coming?
I'm not sure, to be honest. However, I think part of it may be that they believed Peter Credlin. They believed what they were hearing on Sky News After Dark, that if they only doubled down and went harder to the right, they would win. I think part of the problem was that Peter Dutton and the coalition leadership really favoured the Murdoch media, and basically media that was supportive, somewhat sycophantic to it. So they didn't get asked hard questions. They existed in an echo chamber that told them what they were doing was all good. So they didn't understand the public mood. And also when it came to campaigning, Peter Dutton and coalition frontbenchers weren't practiced because they hadn't been going up before genuinely independent journalists who were asking tough and searching questions. And that really showed and did them a disservice.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I thought it was interesting, Sean Kelly's point that it's kind of been a belief, I guess, that unity in politics is kind of a good in its own right, you know, that it brings with it its own benefits. But really, this election has shown that, like, it's nice to have, but it doesn't actually deliver you much in the end.
Look, in my job as a journalist, the best newsrooms I worked in had robust debate where people really, really countered each other and thrashed things out and got better outcomes editorially that way. I believe that's the same for political parties. They should be having robust debate. Certainly, you know, public unity, once you've come to a decision, may be a good thing, but having a position where the leader knows all and we all stand behind dear leader and great leader, that's not going to do them much good.
Australians, unfortunately, are world record holders when it comes to gambling. We bet more than any other country in the world. We lose $25 billion per year on gambling in Australia.
No one's saying that you're going to ban people from having a punt. This is about stopping the inundation, the total saturation of online and off TV, of advertising. That means 3 out of 4 young people now think betting is just a normal part of enjoying sport.
There is no reason for gambling to be on TV or on ads. The only reason these major parties don't want to upset them is because there's an election coming on.
So in its first term, Labor walked back from some of the big reforms that it had flagged, particularly on gambling, I would say. It also chose not to act on reining in gas exports, and in the final days of Parliament, really, it weakened Australia's environment laws. With such a thumping majority in the lower house and no, Murdoch press boogeyman to worry about, do you think Labor will take this opportunity to be a bit braver in this term?
One can only hope so. I mean, there's a Labor Party platform there that contains a lot of material that one would imagine should really guide Labor in government, but traditionally it's been treated as essentially a value statement that's a sop to the membership and isn't necessarily implemented. I don't know which way they'll jump, Ebony. A whole lot of corporate interests, the forces of the Murdoch media and the right wing of the Labor Party itself will be saying, we can't adopt progressive policies, we have to stick to the very centre line or we'll lose support. But guess what? They've got 2 terms, and they might just find if they adopted their party positions on issues like gambling and issues like climate, if they actually did things that were good for the planet and good for the populace and good public policy, as they have with some of their other policies when they've done that, they might find that the public gets in right behind them and they can thumb their nose at the seemingly powerful forces who are saying you can't possibly do that, like the Murdoch press. To some extent, having this thumping majority, more than 90 seats, is a litmus test for the Albanese government. Will you actually back the policies that you supposedly stand for, or will you bow to corporate interests, to the bleatings from the Murdoch press, and just squib it? Because you have an historic opportunity here. Don't waste it. Don't waste it.
Thanks very much for joining me today, Stephen.
Nice to be with you, Eb.
Don't forget, you can order your copy of our inaugural Vantage Point essay. The first edition, After America, Australia and the New World Order by Dr. Emma Shortis, is out this week. You can purchase the first edition for $19.95 or become a foundation subscriber to the Vantage Point series for just $59.95, save 25%. And you can do that at our website, australiainstitute.org.au/store, or tap the link in the show notes. This episode was recorded on Tuesday, the 13th of May, and some things may have changed since recording. We would love to hear your thoughts on the show today, and you can reach out to us via email at podcasts@australiainstitute.org.au or find us on social media. We're at australiainstitute.org.au on Blue Sky and at the Oz Institute, that's with an AUS, on Insta and Twitter. Our theme music is by Jonathan McFeet from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Ebony Bennett, your host, but not for the next 3 weeks because I'm going to be on holidays. So my colleague Glenn will be filling in for me. You can tune in to hear him on Follow the Money from next week. Thanks for listening.